Hello, thank you for joining me once again. Today I am continuing the reading of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. We are on chapter 15. This is part 2. We're on page 235. Thank you for all the new subscribers who have decided to join me on this journey and we can read this book together. Thank you for the subscribers who have already been here on this journey with me. And all of you guys can push the like button, okay? So let's continue the reading of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. The monastery as a place of training and nurturing light workers. The monastery, as a school for spiritual training and nurturing, has perhaps always been its most important function. The world desperately needs light bearers, lighthouses, shining beacons in the night to guide us through the darkness. If potential teachers do not have a place to bloom, there will not be any teachers. This is why the children have maintained monasteries and communities since the days of Atlantis. Steps to the light. Meditation techniques are the tools that help develop concentration, self-discipline, and allow reprogramming of the subconscious mind and habit patterns. The true teacher is the tool that allows the seeker to see themselves clearly, transcend the separate self, develop unselfish love, tune in to their inner voice, and manifest their inner being. When a seeker finds their true teacher and becomes what you might call a dedicated true student, regardless of whether it is in the settings of a monastery or not, they make the commitment of total surrender to universal will and of changing life from a life of taking to a life of giving. Then the student needs to practice, apply what they are learning, and attempt to apply what they are beginning to get from their inner voice. This is where a monastery comes in very handy. It's best if a student's practice takes place in an environment that nurtures that process, where there are other students of like mind to practice with, and where an unenlightened student's actions can be supervised so they don't harm themselves or others. Harm how? There are several ways. The first is harming by giving. To give or not to give? That is not the question in a monastery. In an earlier chapter, it was said that it may seem too idealistic to give unselfishly in a world full of people who are happy to selfishly take. This is somewhat true when you are new to the path. The novice student who is working towards living a life of unselfish love, but who has not yet achieved it, is not prepared to differentiate between what he should give and should not give for the good of others. Remember the example of the beggar lying in the street who may need to be given money or may need to be yelled at? The best situation for a student who isn't capable of acting appropriately in that or many other situations is to live with others who have aspirations / ideal akin to their own. This way, they can give and grow in an environment of inspiration and support, one in which they can safely give all the time without concern about giving in a manner that would be harmful to someone else. The nestling and the nest. For someone who has decided to become a true teacher and dedicate their life to helping others, a spiritual environment is important for their early developmental stages. Just as a baby needs care, nurturing, and a loving environment to develop properly, so does the neophyte. I hope I pronounced that right. Neophyte. Also, just as you would not send an infant out into the world alone, unprepared to deal with it, a novice student, nor any but an initiate really, should not be sent out in the world alone during their spiritual infancy. Why? True teachers can't be influenced by any outside sources. They cannot be influenced by anything or anybody other than God/their hierarchical superiors. Again, why? Because internally they are directly attached to and dependent only on God and give or outflow to all else. True teachers thus radiate the universal spirit. An ancient affirmation relating to this is, I am positive to all things except the absolute, to which I am negative. So rather than being affected by anything else, a true teacher's influences and affects everything else. They're like suns that shine and affect all things within their sphere of influence. They cannot be extinguished, moved, nor even darkened by planets or the dark void of space itself. But such is not yet the case with a novice or even an elder. It is possible for them to be negatively influenced and harmed by forces of darkness in various ways. And like lions lion for their prey to leave their young unprotected, the dark side is eagerly waiting to pounce on those who would dare to become bearers of the light. Having an out-of-body experience without proper preparations and protections is just one example. It can lead to possession. Also, an uninitiated student is still learning many things and developing powers, but doesn't yet have the wisdom to properly use those powers. The student monk can thus be like a loaded gun in the hands of a child. And while not likely, there is the remote possibility of doing harm to others. When I was a student monk, one of my fellow monks unleashed some powerful forces while dabbling. Here is the story. We had a training in the science magic involved with the elements of water, air, fire, etc., and subsequently training in the expansion of the powers of our minds and concentration. But we were not supposed to experiment with these things without supervision. I had noticed that one of my fellow monks, Ishkari, was not at morning group meditation. We had a close relationship and spent a good deal of time together. Thus I usually knew if he was ill or working on some other assignment. So I went looking for him. I eventually found him in an isolated room at the end of one of the wings of the Great Cross building. It was on the top floor, fortunately, as it turned out. Ishkari, what are you doing here? Don't you know what time it is? No. I totally lost track of time, but I have made some amazing progress, Peniel. Watch this. He had been playing with the elements of air. He had become so obsessed with it, it seemed a bit crazed. My inner voice was cringing. Suddenly, I felt a slight breeze blow by me. Objects in the room, like the pages of books and tapestries, began to flap as the breeze increased. I don't think you should be doing this, I said, as the hackles on my neck bristled in the ever-growing wind. He ignored me. He was deep in concentration, entranced. The wind was getting very strong, blowing in a circular motion around the room like an indoor tornado. Heavy objects like chairs were beginning to be blown over, Lamps and books were flying around the room. The wind was so strong. Fortunately, I was in the center, or I would have been struck. "Stop this now!" Still he ignored me. I felt myself being pulled into a vacuum or suction created by the wind in the center of the room, and I dropped to the ground. Just then, the roof of the building flew off, spinning up in the sky, along with most of the contents in the room. He stopped suddenly, and so did the wind, but he wasn't upset about what he had done. He had a grin on his face. He was quite proud of himself. See, I didn't know what to say. It wasn't that the event was so remarkable. I had seen more amazing things by then, but his attitude and his lack of caring, they frightened and shocked me. Ishkari never again came to the group meditations. He preferred to stay to himself. He was denied any more training in science magic, and not long after, he was asked to leave. He had failed the test of having power and not using it. There is more to the story, but to summarize, through his selfish, separate self, he was seduced by the dark forces. I always remembered that message I got from my inner voice, the cringing feeling, and it served me time and time again in the future. It infallibly lets me know the real truth, even when logic and all other appearances seem to say otherwise. Anyway, you get the idea. It is best that students first be trained in a safe environment with supervision in order to grow strong in the light before they venture out to illuminate the darkness. Excuse me. Only when they are home, one with the all, will they be able to safely and positively affect those that come in contact with. Seclusion from temptation until willpower is forged. If you are on your spiritual path, but not living in a monastatic situation, and you have not yet completed the metamorphosis, to being a son of unselfish love, son as an S-U-N, of unselfish love, you will find that the temptations of the world are great. The more you try to develop self-discipline, the more the separate self rebels and fills you with temptations. The self hits you with urges and desires stronger than you have experienced before. As you just read about Ishkari, even having the right support structure was not enough for him. It is hard enough being in the proper environment to survive the urgings of the separate self, let alone doing it on your own. So being in an environment where everyone is doing the same things for discipline or development helps you get through these times while you are forging a willpower of steel. The other side of the coin is this: if you are living amongst regular selfish people, those who separate selves have full control, you don't just have your own temptations to deal with. You will find also that the people around you who are not on a path of unselfish love will tend to hold you back. Old friends can both try and hold you back deliberately because they don't like what you're doing, and accidentally, just because they are a part of your past behavior patterns, and you will tend to fall back into these patterns when they are around. This takes place in many ways, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Have you ever noticed how people take on certain traits of their close associates? There is an osmosis effect of influence. There is also a constant pressure to conform with your peers and not be different. And when your friends, selfish, separate selves, realize that you are trying to transcend your own separate self, their selves will do everything they can to try to hold you down. You are becoming a threat to them, or at least what they think they are. Other people's selfish separate selves would rather keep you in the hole you're in than have you get out of yours and start mucking things up for them. Witch burner syndrome. We've already covered that it is only right to judge others' paths in order to determine your own path. And I'm sure you understand that condemning others is wrong. But even if you have mastered that and have a deep, true feeling of live and let live, you will not be seen that way if you are on the path of unselfish love. Others will judge and condemn your strange manner as being immoral, blasphemous, evil, a scourge on society, or whatever. Some may set out to hurt you in minor ways or major ways. Even if they don't look at you this way in the present, seeds of condemnation can grow in a very clever, twisted sort of way. Here is a warning given to me by Vishnu. When you try to hold to the truth you found, just living your own beliefs quietly to yourself, even though you aren't hurting anyone, condemning others, or telling others how they should be, people will often still feel like you are condemning them. It is the natural reaction of their separate self. They may also twist things around and start thinking that you think that you are better than they are. Even if you are not condemning them, people may still become hostile as if you were, simply because you are living by your own truth that you have found. Because when you live truth, you shine it. And truth is a threat to the separate selves. So, their self will often create an illusion, a smokescreen of feelings that you are judging and condemning them, when it is actually they who are condemning you. They do this at first as a defensive reaction, but later it can be used as a weapon. Michael added this: the I Ching tells us that in times of darkness, the superior man hides his light, yet still shines. The neophyte, a novice, why couldn't they just said it that way first? Novice doesn't really know when it is proper to hide his light and when he should let it shine unrestricted. Thus, a monastatic environment offers protection until the neophyte is fully developed, until the novice is fully developed. Don't bring me down. Vishnu again spoke. Outside of your monastatic environment, one way or another, you will be a target for the negativity of others, including friends, who don't see things the same way as you. Then there are those friends that may see things the way you do, but they are not willing to change. In either case, they will be negative towards you to some degree or another. They will bring pressure to bear. Unless you have transcended your separate self, their negativity will affect you, unless you do something to stop it. It can fan the flames of negativity in you and spread back to them. Have you not seen arguments which start when one person is negative and the other is not at first? Hostility is infectious. Getting infected with hostility lowers the consciousness. Zain cut in. This is like the tuning fork effect we spoke of earlier. Just as inner beings respond to inner being, the separate self responds at the same level of negative vibrations from another separate self. And if you have not transcended your own separate self, so as to be able to feel that in yourself without losing your balance, your inner composure, then you end up being mad or upset yourself. Then you start sending out more negativity, physically, verbally, or all three, as it builds and grows. The same principle works in subtle ways too. Being around lower conscious people hold your consciousness down unless you have become a light. Have you ever noticed children or friends who, when they are alone, behave one way, but when they get around a certain person or group, they behave differently? Yes, I have, but I've always ignored it or put it off to peer pressure, I said. True, also, but what are the truths behind peer pressure? Ah, I said, so much more than meets the eye. Let go of your baggage until you're strong enough to carry it. During my first months at the monastery, once in a while I missed my old girlfriend whom I'd left behind. I told her what I was doing and asked her to come with me, but she would have nothing to do with it. To her, it was bad enough when I went through more subtle changes in my younger years prior to going to the monastery. She got angry any time I moved even a hair closer to unselfish love. I can still hear her scream at me in anger in later years after my enlightenment. You love everybody, she said it like it was a degenerated crime. Why? Because her separate self had no possessive hold on me. I knew our parting was for the best, though. If it weren't for the monastery and I hadn't succeeded in my suicide attempt, we'd probably still be seeing each other on and off, driving each other crazy. And we'd still be arguing all the time. We weren't good for each other, and the relationship did neither of us any good. But we still had strong attachments to each other. What a strange thing to have strong attachments to someone you can't get along with and sometimes can't stand. I talked to Zain about it one day when I was thinking about it and feeling depressed. His words cut through, clear as a bell. When a seeker has thus taken responsibility for their life and accepted their responsibility to be one with and serve God, they must then recreate their life in a way that facilitates the change. A change from living from the separate self to living for the manifestation of the universal spirit. One element of this change is letting go. They must leave behind their old self-baggage along with their past. They must leave behind and replace old selfish-oriented programming and ideas, and they must let go of attachments to people from their old selfish-oriented life who they have self-oriented behavior patterns with, and who thus impede their spiritual development. This is the same for friends or lovers. After one changes and is no longer subject to their own selfishness, then they can properly deal with such things, but only then. When we talk about letting go of an attachment to a person, it's not really the person we let go of. We don't mean to say you must cut off ties with someone in order to let go of a selfish attachment, unless it is an abusive relationship, extremely detrimental, involves mutual negative dependence, or is like an out-of-control addiction. Although it may be far easier, quicker, or better to just cut things off clean. But sometimes the easy path is not the best, and often such selfish attachments can take care of themselves anyway, as do oil and vinegar. All that can be definitely said is that we must lose ourselves selfish attachments. Unfortunately, the primary reason for the existence of many relationships is only based on feeding off of the attention each person's selfish separate self receives from the other. This creates mutual or one-sided possessiveness, which in turn breeds all kind of negative emotions depending on the changing tides of circumstances. This is especially true in intimate or romantic relationships, also hobbies, interests, or ideas. And then there is also karma to take into considerations. This one you speak of may be a soulmate, but her consciousness is not on the level of yours, and she is not willing to grow. And your consciousness and inner strength are not on the level of being up to the task of helping her. For now, at least. But sometimes when your paths take you in different directions, you should let go. You must let go. And even if you refuse to let go, sometimes fate gives you no choice. Always remember, though, those who truly belong together will never be parted forever, and often not for long. But in any case, you must free yourself from your attachments to those who have any measure of negative influence over you, or who impede your spiritual growth, your flowing with universal will, or your manifestation of God. Unselfish love, God's love, is impersonal. It loves everyone. It is the separate self that cuts us off from this and prevents this, and one of the ways it does it by developing separate self-oriented attachments. What do you mean that sometimes fate takes care of it? The universal law of vibration automatically creates changes of associates when you change. Remember our discussion with Gabriel? Oil and vinegar are of different molecule vibrations, and they will each seek their own level if you mix them. If a part of the oil changed to become vinegar, it would join the vinegar level and be surrounded by vinegar, and vice versa. As you change your level of consciousness, your vibration, to a higher one, you rise to a new level where new higher consciousness friends will be found. Those of the old vibration that do not change as you do may try to hold you down, but if they are unsuccessful, they generally just ultimately fall away and stay behind in their own choice of worlds, their own choice of consciousness, all of their own accord. To them, your changes make you weird, boring, and no fun. And to you, they also become uninteresting, shallow, and boring. When this happens, it may initially feel like a loss, but when you merge into your new higher level of consciousness and find those who belong with you on the same level, it feels wonderful. It is an incredible feeling to find your new higher companions, soulmates, or soul group family. But before you can change and find your new natural vibrational level, you must make those changes happen. Selfish-oriented relationships are virtually the only kind of relationships non-enlightened beings have. The spiritual seeker needs to get free from the negative effects of such relationships, while selfishly based romantic relationships are a big problem. The more subtle relationships with friends and other relationships offer problems and challenges also. Like what? The spiritual seeker who wants to change as rapidly as possible should stop wasting any time. And if part of what that wasting time is hanging out with people or friends whose direction in life is self-centered rather than universal or spiritually, regardless of how nice or harmless this seems to be, then you are slowing yourself down or even maybe condemning yourself. People have established patterns of behaviors in their relationship based on complex interactions between the selfish separate selves who are involved. For the seeker, these behavioral patterns are negative side trips off their main spiritual path. I'm not sure what you mean exactly. Could you be more specific? You know what I mean. Diversions, selfish highs, making small talk, playing or watching games, pursuing mutual self-interest, doing business, whatever. The behavioral patterns of those who are in such self-oriented relationships are selfish, separate self, supportive, and thus negative. And the patterns can't be changed until a student is totally free from his own selfish, separate self. That's one reason there have always been monasteries and convents, so people can focus only on their growth without any diversions or temptations even offering themselves, until they have either achieved their goal or become strong enough to become uninfluenceable. So you mean avoid things you have in common or do in common that are fruitless? Not just doing things that are fruitless, an entire association can be harmful. Just like addicts or criminals, there are many subtle, seemingly harmless behaviors that can negatively affect you. Whether it is just a moment away from your growth, which can be that one extra moment you needed to achieve enlightenment before you die. Or it takes a moment away from something vital that you might eventually be doing to help others once you are serving God. Or something that actually is directly harmful. A former criminal who really wants to go straight should no longer associate with former friends who are still criminals because they are likely to commit crimes again. True? Yes. A drug addict who really wants to kick the habit should not associate with drug-addicted friends, or he is likely to use drugs again. True? Yes. The selfish separate self is similarly affected by other selfish separate selves. Thus, the true seeker of spiritual change, who really wants to change, must treat his separate self addiction just as seriously. And if they want to be more sure of staying on the wagon, They need to keep away from both the drugs that feed the addiction and from those who are addicts. Like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean never seeing or talking to your old associates again. Like I said, but it is obvious that you do need to focus on freeing yourself from your own selfish, separate self. Kick the habit totally and become immune to the negative effects of being around other selfish, separate selves. Otherwise, you will never be truly good for the person in that relationship, and they will never be good for you. That is one of the functions of the monasteries, but it could also be fulfilled by one or more friends who are on the same path, or at least going in a similar direction as you. Things will be changing in the future, and you will have to find new ways to accomplish helping people with this sort of thing. Without our monastery, or possibly any monastery. What? It is not time. Let me go on. Just remember this. Whether you have a traditional monastery or not, it is vital for the serious spiritual seeker and student who wishes to grow as fast as possible to find associates who are not part of their selfish attachments or selfish addictive past. Instead, they should surround themselves or primarily associate with people who have a similar spiritual orientation and whose company is spiritually supportive. This is very important because, again, at this early stage of beginning to change, the outside influences of one's associates have a great effect. Thus, people need monasteries, spiritual communities, or at least friends and associates on the same path. I'll scratch your separate self if you scratch mine. But leaving people behind. What of those who need you? Who you could have helped if you stayed with them or at least stayed in touch. I have regrets over this. My old friends are hurt. My family hates me for abandoning my mother while she was sick. Does she have no one to care for her? No, she does. We weren't really associating anyway because she didn't like my girlfriend, and she told me to get rid of my girlfriend or get out of the house when I was 16 years old. And she has her brothers and sisters that take care of her. What is wrong with her? Sometimes called shingles. It's like sores along the spine, and the doctor said it is emotionally stimulated. Ah, and why did she get sick? I think it was to keep me there. She has a powerful mind, but there was also one of my friends. He was so close, he almost came with me here. Yet he is not here. Why? His girlfriend got pregnant and convinced him to stay, proving my point, it seems. But what if I could have helped him still? First, listen to me now. This is vital for you to understand and remember. Until you transcend your separate self, even if you are not being negatively affected by those around you, you will not be of any real aid to them or anyone. Because with your separate self in control, your thoughts, words, and actions will tend to feed or feed off of the separate self of others as your separate self strives to survive. Your only real chance to help your mother or your friends is to change yourself first. Secondly, you have so many to help. You must care as much about a stranger as much as your closest friend. Why is a stranger any less important than your friends or relatives? or your drinking buddies, fishing buddies, bridge club, or whomever. We are all identical children of one God, all just as important as any other. The beggar in the street is as important as the king of the world. If you don't feel that way, you don't have unselfish love or universal consciousness, and you are useless to anyone. All beings are part of the one, all the same underneath, all children of the one God, and you have many you will help. If you stayed behind, what help would you have been to anyone, including your mother or friends? Honestly, you just may be able to help your mother and your friends after you truly love them, but that will only be up to them. You are still just selfish and uncaring yourself. So how much help can you be now? None. Thank you. It is much clearer now. So the teachings advise those who seek oneness with the universal spirit to place themselves in a monastatic community where they can nurture and develop in spirit. It doesn't need to be big. You can even do it with a couple of like-minded friends or relatives, as long as everyone understands the rules of interaction given and living with each other. It would also be good to have a teacher in such a situation. But even without one, there definitely needs to be a head for the body that everyone agrees will have final say-so. And has a good amount of respect for, at least initially. The teacher doesn't necessarily need to be living with you, although that is the most desirable. But you must have a teacher that everyone agrees has greater insight than their own and has the respect to give direction and input to all members and to decide any disagreement when they crop up. The most important thing is that each member approach each other member with total humility rather than defensiveness. One of the biggest problems of the self creates to defeat growth is the ego trait of wanting to be right all the time, or at least having the appearance of being right. A person who is set on appearing right all the time actually creates a pattern in which they are usually wrong most of the time. And worse, they don't even learn from their mistakes. But a person who doesn't care how they appear to others and has a humble attitude will eventually be right all the time. A musician who is afraid to hit wrong notes when they are learning or playing will learn far slower and be a much poorer player than one who takes the risk and goes for it and doesn't care if he looks foolish because he hits a wrong note once in a while. That one will be the fastest learner and ultimately the greatest artist. Be humble and you will grow. Be the lowest and you will be the highest. Give only to the spirit in others. From Vishnu. Through practicing giving within your circle of like-minded people, you will eventually know well the difference between giving to the separate self and giving to the whole being and inner being. Eventually, you will be able to give to the entire world, even to those who would selfishly take, for you will be giving what they need for their spiritual development, rather than nurturing their separate selves. One hand washes the other. From Michael. The ideal state of things is for everyone to be giving all the time. This is the state of paradise. In an ideal material world, this would include material things on the material plane, which indeed is part of the whole and should have reflect universal harmony. Everyone has different talents and skills, and if all give, all needs will be filled. For example, a seamstress makes clothes, a shoemaker makes shoes, a carpenter carps, etc. In a world where everyone is giving, taking care of each other, it would work very simple. If the seamstress needs shoes, she gets them. If the shoemaker needs a house built, it's built. If the carpenter needs clothes, they're made. No bargaining, a trade, no buying or selling, just giving, just unselfish love. This is the idea behind brotherly love and communism. But communism doesn't work well for the ordinary people of the world. Do you know why? The same reason nothing works well: selfishness. And with selfishness mixed with communism, it can be worse. When you take away the greed factor in making a living and put things on a level that all things are shared, people start putting out less effort. They do this for a couple of reasons. They know that they will get taken care of regardless of how much they contribute. And two, they know that regardless of how much they contribute, they won't get any more than a share in everyone's prosperity. How sad. Done properly, unselfishly loving beings, such a thing would increase the wealth, beauty, and creativity of an entire society beyond anything, beyond anything that's been known. What else is our monastery but this? But the selfish, separate self will always prevent that as long as it is in control. And as we have seen by the communist governments that were controlled by selfish, separate selves, they would cheat and destroy it all anyway. The only reason it can work in a monastery is because we can control it here so much better, so much more easily. And the main concern or direction here is to become selfless and giving, not just to share everything equally and selfishly. Fortunately, until the whole world can live together in unselfish love, we have the mini world, the mini society, the spiritual community, where those who desire to can open up and give of themselves. In a monastery community such as that, everyone is either already unselfishly loving or working towards achieving that. And such joining of forces makes for a much greater force. Of course, even in our own monastery, we must stay vigilant and occasionally must root out and chastise the lazy who would selfishly take advantage of our brotherly love. But overall, it is the greatest way of living. This quote from the I Ching is a favorite of mine regarding the essence of the spiritual community or monastery. What is required is that we unite with others in order that all may complement and aid one another through holding together. But such holding together calls for a central figure around whom other persons may unite. If a man has recognized the necessity for union and does not feel strong enough to function as the center, it is his duty to become a member of some other organic fellowship. There have been many sorts of alternative communities formed over the years. Communities with a strong spiritual foundation and leadership are the ones that stand the test of time. Those that don't have strong spiritual leadership usually disintegrate entirely or partially, with the members withdrawing from each other into their separate spaces, holding bitter feelings. There will eventually come a time when everyone will be unselfishly loving with one and one with the universal one. Then there will be no need for leaders or teachers, and governments will come from within. But in the spiritual community, at this stage of consciousness evolution, there is a definite need for leadership. First, that problem of selfish people not carrying their own weight can affect and infect a monastery also. There needs to be a clear-sighted, well-respected leader in order to avoid leeches, corruption, and to rid the stranglers. For a community, having a good leader is like having a good head on your shoulders. Leadership is necessary for coordination of the members' activities, somewhat like the way the mind coordinates the various functions of the members of a physical body. Finally, an unselfishly loving leader/teacher can function as a means of response and attunement to the universal consciousness/God through the applications of devotion, unselfish love, the practice of bhakti yoga. This is a method by which the love the student has for the teacher tunes the student into the teacher's universal consciousness and thus raises the student's own consciousness. Besides the functions and purposes of the spiritual community we have thus far mentioned, there is also the advantage of the concentrated/combined power you have when people unite. Great things can be accomplished when we work as one. Alone, we can accomplish little compared to that which we can do together, whenever two or more are gathered together in His name. The new monasticism fellowship in the New World. As I started out saying in the beginning of this chapter, times change. Our monastery in Tibet is destroyed, and many teachers, students, and householders have been murdered. We need new monasteries, but in these times, there is the danger that any small true spiritual movement in which people live together in a monastic fashion will simply be labeled a cult, demonized, attacked, and destroyed. Such labeling and harassment can even happen just because it doesn't fit in with the even more closely monitored norm of behavior. So regarding new monasteries, it cannot be just as it was, perhaps in the future after the great changes, but not now. On a side note, fortunately, the great changes are coming. The prophecies, including the desecration of the land of teachers, have come to pass, and more prophecies are still being fulfilled. Just today, I saw the destruction of the church of Assisi, where St. Francis was burned. I was devastated by an earthquake. It was devastated by an earthquake. It was a sign, a fulfillment of prophecy. Also, as I write, a cloud of smoke, half the size of the United States, is choking people around Asia. And the incredible fires that are causing it were started by humans destroying more fertile soil. And humans changing the atmosphere of the earth itself. El Nino phenomenon, dying reefs, giant holes of ozone depletion, overfishing of the oceans. You name it, there it is. As humankind's stupidity brings nature's reactions, we are accelerating towards change. More volcanoes are activating and erupting. People everywhere are dying of drought, flooding, and new diseases. Famine and economic collapses are around the corner. Many people don't see it and don't want to believe these things are coming. They're in denial because they're afraid. It's quite natural because the scenario can be quite frightening. But seeing what is really going on and what is coming is just a matter of opening your eyes and looking at it all without fear. It helps if you see it as a healing crisis rather than just a horrible, meaningless destruction. Back to new monasticism. For some of you, this book is just somewhat interesting or somewhat boring reading. For others, it is what you have been hoping for or what you'll want more. For others, it is what you have hoped for and you'll want more. For you, our order is still here, but the outer form has been forcibly changed, and a new one is being born. Some of our ways of life of the past are gone. Time is short, and we must adapt or cease to survive entirely. Thus, we must use the tools of these times in our own ends as much as possible. The future will see the building of new monasteries, centers, or communities. Perhaps benefactors will come forward to help, but in any case, we will find the means if it is in the will of universal spirit. But as long as one of us is still alive, we will always carry on our work with or without our primary monastery. There are still teachers around the world for those who want, need, and are ready for one. And advances in technology are also affording new ways of reaching and helping large numbers of people in many different ways. The vibrational sounds can accurately be reproduced and made available to the masses due to the advent of audio CDs. We now have websites that allow people to read free chapters of this book, learn meditations online, get books, vibrational sounds, yoga videos, music, and other tools for conscious raising. It also serves a dual purpose because the funds coming from it and mail order help support our endeavors and monks, which in turn helps us help others. If we are able, we also envision creating a unique spiritual resort where people can come and spend time in a secluded, beautiful, natural setting and spiritual environment. Guests would have many options. They could just relax and enjoy the beauty of pristine nature, take walks along meditative paths, participate in group meditations and discussions/lectures, be alone with themselves and meditate at high energy vortexes, or learn new meditations, yoga, or interpersonal golden rule transformational techniques. The internet and telecommunication has also afforded new means for spiritual interaction. If you want to network or contact a teacher, elder, or novice, you can still use mail, of course, but now you can also do so via email. See end of book. The company who handles our mail orders can also set appointments for an elder monk to call you if you really need to speak with one. We can even help those of you who wish to network with each other or form study groups to get in contact with each other. Anywhere in the world, you can now stay in touch with each other and even work together. What a strange, horrible, wonderful time. Note, we have been swamped with letters, emails, and people requesting calls. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough time and people to keep up with the volume. So, if you write or email, please keep in mind that we may not be able to get back to you for weeks, months, or even at all. If you have a very important message, you could leave a message with a mail order company that handles our products. Number in back of book. Okay, that was the end of chapter 15. Chapter 16 starts on page 247. We have been reading The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by John Peniel. Valuable information. I'm enjoying it. I really hope you are. I'm sure if you're listening along, you are. So thank you to all the subscribers. I send the invitation to those that have not subscribed. It is a warm, fuzzy invitation at that. And remember to push the like button, okay? So until the next time we meet, have the most benevolent day.